Hello, I'm Robert LeBoyer, Senior Biotechnology Analyst at Noble Capital. Our next presenting company is ZYUS Life Sciences, a Canadian company developing cannabinoid-based products for human health and therapeutics. With us is Chairman and CEO Brent Zettel. Please proceed, Mr. Zettel.
Thank you, Robert, and welcome everyone. ZYUS Life Sciences as a company was created in 2018. I started the company shortly after I was bought out by a former company in 2018 in the cannabinoid space. Our goal in starting the company 5 years ago, just almost 6 years ago now, was to look at a cannabinoid formulation that could be used for pain. We had a previous pedigree of over 20 years in the cannabinoid space in the healthcare section with Health Canada contracts and so forth. And we learned that from that period of time, there's a meaningful cannabinoid profile that could be brought forward for managing pain and using it as an alternative to opiates. So our vision was really to reimagine the potential of pain management using a true cannabinoid formulation where we could define a pharmaceutical application that would have a DIN or DINable product, a drug identification number, that we would follow the US FDA regulatory authority in making 3 drugs. We have 3 drugs in the pipeline, 2 relate to pain. One is for chronic pain and one is for neuropathic pain. The biggest difference that we have is that we've actually discovered a 3rd active, non-psychoactive cannabinoid that works on pain. It's called cannabichromene, and it's used in our formulation. We use it as part of our ongoing development. We have 3 drugs in the pipeline. This, as I relate, cannabichromene is a leading cannabinoid in those formulations, and it also is one that we've been able to build up a very substantive intellectual property platform from. So our tagline is advancing the science of well-being. As a life science company, we are really focused on true drugs that could be developed for pharmaceutical application. It's interesting, since 2018 in Canada, when legalization happened, there was 24% of doctors writing prescriptions for medical cannabis in this country. And since that time, what's happened is since 2018, legalization, actually the percentage of prescriptions by doctors has dropped to 8% of doctors writing scripts. And it's primarily because there's a lot of confusion around the type of brands there are, the type of products, and there's nobody understands dosing as it relates to the variety of different products. Our goal is to go through the clinical trial process proper and the development of these drugs so that we can establish the true medical application, the understanding that through clinical trials, it's the statistical evidence that we have that proves that it works from an efficacy perspective, and then also have all the safety and dosing requirements for physicians. So we are a Canadian life science company. We are committed to delivering safer products for patients as an alternative to the opiates. We believe that there's a strong, compelling argument for that. Interestingly enough, prior to 1937 in the United States, 28% of all medications in the United States were cannabis-based. And now, post 86 years later, there still isn't anything better that we can see that an alternative yet for opiates. Yet the chronic demand, or the demand for chronic pain, is still very compelling. Over 5 years of R&D, and the biggest thing that we have with us as well is that yours truly has put in over $63 million back into work in this endeavor. So if you add in with the board of directors and our other principals, you add another $7 million onto that. So we're at $70 million of company support, internal management that's supporting this initiative. We have 90% of our effort is in the drug development sector. So we have these 3 drugs, as we talked about, going through clinical trials, so completing 64 preclinical trials and now a phase 1 clinical proper that was through the pre-IND that we did with the US FDA. But 10% of our effort is actually for our own manufacturing. And we can actually produce our products to 99.7% purity in the cannabinoids themselves. So the active ingredients we use are actually to meet the ICH guidelines for using in a clinical trial application. The reason we had to do it strategically is because in the interest of time, we couldn't find an organization anywhere in the world that had a GMP rated manufacturing facility, as well as a cannabinoid license or cannabis license to produce products. So given our long pedigree and understanding of how these products work, we decided to build our own facility so we can move quicker into getting these products into market and into clinical research, A, and B, speed up the process for which we can get these products into the hands of patients. So we have a strong pipeline. We have 3 drugs in the pipeline, 2 relate to, one for neuropathic pain, one for chronic pain, and the third one for anxiety and depression. We believe the addressable chronic pain market is quite compelling. I'll show evidence that's north of 100 billion with 2023 estimate for sales and chronic pain sales on a global basis, heading to 177 billion annually by 2031. So there's lots of room in the market to grow as thanks to the baby boomer demographic. And at the same time, we're seeing a continued effort to curtail or to reduce the amount of opiates that are being used in these chronic pain and neuropathic pain conditions. We have a deep team that's related into experience in this area. And of course, we have a very robust intellectual property platform with our first patent for our 3-part API, which is a combination of THC, CBD, and CBC. And it is we've got it prosecuted in 9 countries. It's been approved, and it's a national phase entry in both the US and European jurisdictions. This is a milestone-driven format. It just this presentation is on our website at ZYUS.com, and at leisure people can look at it a little deeper and have a deeper understanding. But basically, it just evidences that we are all about execution. We have our GMP manufacturing facility that was GMP rated. We have a phase 1 clinical trial completed to the end of this end of 2023, and we're moving into phase 2 clinical trial, plus all the preclinical trial evidence, and of course our intellectual property development plan. Our team consists of seasoned professionals. John Hishka is our CFO. Has been in the space for 35 years, health and life sciences. Keith Carpenter, who's a key strategy officer. He's been with us from the beginning of ZYUS, formerly an analyst in Bay Street. Lionel Marc de Chabray, who's a pain specialist in Ontario. And of course, our VP of clinical research is Scott Livingstone, who was the primary guy that we had involved in clinical research and was involved in the cancer agency for a number of years. Our board of directors, our chairman is actually from St. Louis. He's formerly with Mallinckrodt. He's recently retired after 40 years there. John Knowles is our CFO previously. He's with mining company Garnet Weber, is a successful local entrepreneur who developed an online marketing team or company. Wayne Brownlee is a former CFO of Potash Corporation and Nutrien, brings a lot of bandwidth in public traded companies. And of course, Dr. Charlotte Moore-Hepburn, who is the pediatrician at Toronto Sick Children's Hospital. From a strategy perspective, as I mentioned, the market, there's about 100 billion chronic pain market value to 2023, heading to 177 billion, driven by, of course, a demand. 50 million Americans suffering in this, 1 in 5 Americans, 1 in 4 Canadians, 1.6 billion people globally, and of course, 11.5 million of them self-reporting abuse by opiates. There's a compelling business opportunity of a non-opiate-based pain therapy in the market today. When I was previous company at CanAmed, we had 48,000 patients, and of that, we started running data on what they were using cannabinoid for. 58% across the board were using it for managing some form of pain, and 19% for a neurological disorder, which is anxiety depression. Our 3 drugs, 2 of them are pain and 1 is a neurological disorder area. Compelling argument for the money that's being spent today in medical cannabis. Medical cannabis use in Canada, prescription-based, was 409 million in 2022, but it's 10.7 billion in the United States. If you extrapolate that 58%, that means that between Canada and the United States, there's about 7 billion a year being spent between the 2 populations managing chronic pain using a cannabinoid of some description. Our conviction is that if we have a DIN on a drug that's used for pain, that would be brought more underneath the medical system, can be used in the formulary in Canada or life and the insurance. It could have medical claims. That's where we think the holy grail is, and for the drugs that are non-opiate based but are cannabinoid based. Example of that, the playbook, GW Pharmaceuticals. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. Went public in 2013, but ironically, they only filed a matter of use patent in 2015 for epilepsy and Dravet syndrome. and they got an orphan drug designation, went through the entire FDA approval process, got approved in 2018 in the US, later in 2019, and of course they sold through Jazz for $7.2 billion. It's the playbook. You find a cannabinoid, you get its matter of use patented, not the composition of matter, but its matter of use, and then you put a clinical trial program discipline together for that with the purified cannabinoids, and then you approach the FDA in order to get drugs approved. Vertex is another one that's what we show as a parallel. They have a non-opiate drug that's an organic salt. As many of you know, they announced their phase 2 clinical trial results on their research drug, the VX548. And in December, they had $12 billion jump in valuation. And it was because it was mode of action was the sodium ion channels. And we applaud, of course, their initiatives in this area. And we see that this is a real benefit, and evidence is that there's investor appetite for non-opiate-based drugs. In our drug development plan, basically the endocannabinoid system is a CB1 and CB2 receptor. One's in the blood, one's in the nervous system. Was discovered in the early 90s, but to most people, they don't really understand how this impacts on the human being. Yet alone the medical community is just getting their arms around it. It's different from and separate from the natural opiate system we have. We have 9 receptors in the opiate side and only 2 receptors that we know of so far in the endocannabinoid side. But interestingly enough, we've discovered that the mode of action, our products really are involved in 4 areas of mode of action. Of course, the endocannabinoid system, as I referred to just previously, but the transient receptor potential, or TRP channels are called, that's our sensory channels. Like when you go into a swimming pool, you feel cold and you warm up, that's the TRP channel working. Anyway, we have the products that we have work to desensitize that. Inflammation. Looks like we have several pro-inflammatory cytokine in lowering that of the pro-inflammatory that leads to a reduction in inflammation pain. And fourthly, our products are involved in the sodium ion channels and reducing that. So that's why we see our 4 areas of potential, and we can capture the entourage effect of all of these 4 modes of action that are separate and apart from the modes of action of the opiates, which makes them very powerful because you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. That's what it boils down to. So here's the evidence, scientific evidence, and I won't bore you with the details, but this is a population of rats that was studied. This is our aha moment that our patents are based upon, and a movement of a rat, and the more normal the movement, the better the use, the better the pain is being managed. And so the gray bar in this bar chart refers to a population of rats that was just give olive oil as our blank control. This population of rats was given pregabalin, which did 5.7 billion in sales before it came off patent in 2017. This population of rats was given a 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD. And of course, the very last bar was given 3-part API, which includes CBC or cannabichromene. And as you can see from the data, trichomelin, or the 3-part API, outperformed Lyrica, or pregabalin, quite significantly. And the conclusion of our third party analyst lab was that superior analgesic effect when compared to pregabalin. This was the aha moment, which showed evidence that this was working in a mammalian system, that CBC, cannabichromene, is adding accretive value that's a non-psychoactive for managing pain in a mammalian model. So here we are now in the end. We finished our phase 1 clinical trial at the very end of 2023. It's well tolerated. I'll speak to that in just a second. But now we're moving into a phase 2 clinical trial proper, with our pain indication is going to be our primary endpoint, along with dosing and safety, and a secondary endpoint being for basically for opiate sparing. Our second drug is also completed a partial phase 1, moving in 1B for neuropathic pain. We have to finish some safety toxicology, and our third drug is still in validation and discovery completion. So again, from a first-in-human product, our products were first-in-human. We moved along quite nicely. We got some PK data, we got some tolerability and safety data, and then we're now moving into phase 2 proper with a placebo-based. The second one, as I mentioned, is going through safety toxicology, heading to a 1B. So positive results in our phase 1 clinical trial. The highlights was well tolerated. 97.5% of enrollments completed the study, and with only 1 participant who had to be excused because they had a pre-existing condition. But there was no serious adverse events. So we had no serious adverse events, no dose limiting, and no trial suspensions, again, showing how it was well tolerated. And the top 3 that we had were euphoric mood, somnolence, which means a better sleep, and fatigue. the top side effects. Now we're moving into phase 2 clinical trial proper. It'll be in Canada. It'll be 126 patients. So it is a double-blinded, placebo-controlled, randomized, multiple dose escalation study. We'll see, we're doing the manufacturing of our products as we speak, and we'll be moving first in patient later this summer and having preliminary results by December of 2025, looking for final results towards the third quarter of next year. So that is what we're moving. It'll be a 1-to-1 ratio, placebo-based, that complies with our soon to be, we'll be making an IND submission in the future as for the FDA as it relates to the placebo-based approach in our phase 2. Our clinical advisory committee consists of not only our chief medical officer, but also Miss Audrey Hokioja, who is formerly with Roche at a VP capacity and drug development, Dr. Mary Lynch, who is a pain psychologist from Dalhousie, Dr. Hans Clark, who is a well-known KOL based out of Toronto in a pain clinic in Toronto at Toronto General, Dr. Alice Swirling, who's epidemiologist from the University of Ottawa, and of course, Dr. Cedric Francois, which may be a recognizable name for some of you folks because he is the president of APLS on the NASDAQ. They got a drug approved for ocular degenerative condition, and he is also on bio, and that was the chairman of the opiate sparing component. So from access of products, we do have the product lines that we're moving and be looking at doing to continue on our development as we move forward in the near future. And of course, this is a summary that we are a science-based approach as we move into these products. We have a robust patent portfolio. We have a strong pipeline of development, 3 drugs in the pipeline, 2 related to pain, 1 for chronic, 1 for neuropathic pain. We have an EU GMP rated facility for manufacturing, which de-risks our potential and speeds up the process to get our clinical trial development program in place. And of course, with the management team that's had a lot of experience in this space, as well as of course, adaptable, being nimble and small as a company. And that is our presentation.
Well, thank you, Brett. That was very interesting and very enlightening as to what you're doing and helps differentiate your company from others that I've seen in cannabis or in pain. So one of the questions that I had was about safeguarding the discoveries and how are you going to maintain a proprietary position, given that a lot of these compounds are naturally occurring and can't be patented.
Yeah, so the difference that we have, you can't really, just like GW, you can't patent what's called composition of matter. So you can't patent the molecule itself. But what you can patent is its matter of its use. And so where it's applied to. And so in this discovery in which we did, cannabichromene wasn't known to work on pain. So what we patented was its matter of use in a human being, not its naturally occurring composition of matter. So that's the differentiation, is the fact that we're applying the matter of use patents, and that's what the basis of the patents have been upon, is its matter of use. And that's what we've been granted. And interestingly enough, as we go through all of the different countries, they've granted us 100% of our claims thus far because there was no prior art. And in order to build a clinical platform and development, you need that protection. So the first one has gone through. We've got the second one that is in national phase entry as well. But we've got, we've developed a series of patents that relate to these cannabinoids, giving us that protection for the matter of its use, which allows us and affords us to make the investments in clinical trials proper, and then gets the drugs into getting through the FDA process proper.
Okay, good. And one of the other points that you mentioned was that since cannabis has been legalized in both Canada and most US states, the medical use patients have been declining and sales for medical use have declined. But in the US, many states required a medical cannabis card and then dispensing through a clinic. Now those same people can go to any dispensary, if it's legal in that state, and just buy it retail. So they're no longer captured as medical patients.
Right.
Are there any estimates of the number of patients that could go from recreational use and just self-medicating back to medical use with your product if approved?
Yeah, so the market, the graph that I showed, the $10.7 billion spent in the United States in 2022 related to just prescription use of medical cannabis. That's not even recreational use, but that's a consolidated number across the entire United States. People prescribing or applying with a medical card to get medical access. So it was the measurement was 10.7 billion. Now, in our data that we did previously, that means that 58% of those people reaching out for that prescription have pain, and they're trying to use medical cannabis for pain. The difference that we have is because of the third element, with cannabichromene, this is a more effective treatment for pain, number one, but also having it purified in a dose form, it'll be more precise. And so from a doctor's perspective, they can dose it more accurately and have data that looks to drug interaction or whatever other program and builds it into the regime. Because the problem that the doctors have is the stuff that you can get through dispensaries is not clearly defined or has a dosing regime because they're so variable. There's so many different products. And so it's kind of like doing brain surgery with an axe. It's kind of effective, but it just speaks to the fact that there's a dire need for something that's non-opiate based, that people are turning to a cannabinoid. Again, having this ability to put this third cannabinoid in there and then getting it into the dosing requirements or getting into a dosing regime that the doctors can rally around makes it a lot easier to prescribe. And that'll be the game changer in our mind from the doctor's perspective. And I guess the other aspect is that once you have we get approval as a drug, we get a drug identification number, then it can be covered by insurance. They don't pay out of pocket. And that's the holy grail.
Yes. So you would have better dosing, more precise, more reliable responses, a dosing regimen that's effective, and reimbursement. So
yeah, and then you can also have within that, we'll have some indications of what drug-to-drug interaction to watch for, because we'll have the discipline of our drugs going into that part of the trial, so that all the clinicians have to do is look at this and they can fit it in conveniently with all the other medications that are already prescribing. We produce this as a gel cap, just so you know. So it's a 3-part API in a gel cap. So it's very easily administered.
yeah, this isn't like any of the opioids or anything like that or anything like that. So it's probably abuse resistant. Have you addressed that?
Yes, the addiction scale, this is of cannabinoid, of THC in particular, is about the same as coffee. Now, a CBC is, we have got zero evidence to this point about its addictive nature because it's non-psychoactive. We know it's non-psychoactive. So we do know that it's, but no, whereas opiates are north of 70% on the addiction scale, the opiates are the same as coffee, which is in the high teens. So arguably speaking, it's from a harm reduction potential. This is what we see as being able to use. Now, we're not going to get rid of opiates. I think they're going to be needed in medical practice forever because there is a role for them. The issue is really a lack of available other things. Like I said, a mode of action, because as human beings, we're complicated beings, and there's other reasons we hurt, including inflammation, including the challenges of ECS and the sodium ion channels, the ion channels. So the cannabinoids address these other portions of that. So they are a good they're good on offset. So instead of being overprescribed, they can be used in exchange. And in fact, a lot of the shareholders that came in initially was because they had loved ones that were stage 4 cancer, and they were cancer patients. We're addressing cancer pain in our clinical trial as our indication. And they had loved ones that they could actually use our medical cannabinoid, our products, and they were able to have lucid conversations with them because they were able to reduce their opiates. And that's why they invested.
Yeah, and to that, I'd add that I've heard extensive reports of the crackdown on opioids has made them unavailable for a lot of patients who need them. So being a non-opioid, there's a market opportunity that you would be addressing right there.
Well, 100%. And so there's again, the safety of it. We have to prove, we got to go through all the rites of passage of getting a drug approved, which is all the safety and toxicology work. We're following on the US FDA guidelines. We did do a pre-IND meeting with them. We're going to do a full-blown IND submission to the FDA, but we're on the trajectory to get these drugs approved, these cannabinoids, this unique profile, and you can approved as a drug that can be used for chronic and neuropathic pain. That is our takeaway.
Great. Okay. And just one final question, can you outline some of the milestones coming up that we can
Sure.
look?
So we can expect to, in the near term, we're going to see some patent activity. We'll be announcing if there's approvals of patents that we have coming up in the near term. We are going to be announcing preliminary results later in the year of our phase 2 clinical trial when we launch, and some of the preliminary information we'll be doing on a phase 2 efficacy. That'll be a big one in terms of what's coming. We'll have all the patients through clinic later in 2025, mid 2025, we'll be making announcements along that. And then we'll be talking about our second drug and its development as we get a plan put in place for that, but it's on the plan for us to see how it's going to start in the neuropathic pain. So the first one's targeting chronic pain using cancer as its indication. The second one will be for neuropathic pain. We still haven't chosen the model yet, but it'll be on the trajectory as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. We will be looking for those catalysts going forward.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, everyone.
Okay, have a great day.
You too. Bye now.